How's it going? I'm Judd Lienhard, speed and performance coach, and today I'm going to help you unlock the secret to big thighs. The thick wheels, the quadzillas, tree trunks, the ghetto twins, whatever you want to call them. Quads, I'm going to help you grow them using anatomy and science. Here we go. Okay, there's a common misconception that since your quadricep muscles, the four muscles in the front of your thigh, share a common tendon attachment, your quad tendon right above your knee, that you don't need a large variety of exercises and movements in order to train them effectively. Basically, just knee extension under a lot of tension will grow all of your quad muscles basically the same. And I'm going to push back on that notion based using biomechanics, physics, and physiology here, okay? So, you know, even my professor kind of thought this in college, one of them, and he had little legs, just so you know. But basically, your four quadricep muscles here, you can see three of them right away. So we're going to start with the one on the outside, the vastus lateralis muscle. It's a unipennate muscle, which means it runs off of one tendon and all of the muscle fibers kind of run off at an angle this way. It attaches up here to something called the greater trochanter of your femur, and it attaches or feeds into the lateral side of your quad tendon right here, right? So unipennate muscles, they put out more force than a fusiform muscle, but not as much as a bipennate muscle, so they're still trained with a good range of motion and a good stretch. So you can stretch this muscle better if the knee is medial to your hip bone, or at least not out to the outside. So that tells us that things like lunges train this muscle the best. And my favorite exercise to train the vastus lateralis, or the quad sweep, is just a front foot elevated forward lunge. But things like front foot elevated rear lunges, Bulgarian split squats, walking lunges, all train it really good as well. So to demonstrate here, I'm just going to use a safety bar. I like to put a bumper plate out here. It's about 2 inches off the ground. Be about one leg length away from the plate. Step forward onto the plate and go down until my knee is almost on the ground or touches the ground. And you'll see that my knee is medial to my hip bone here. So this quad sweep gets a really good stretch, both by a lot of knee flexion and by having it medial to my hip bone here. Another thing is these muscles have a good mix of both fast twitch and slow twitch fibers, and the fiber types are easily changed from one version to another, more so than other fiber types. So they respond to a good amount of rep ranges and are very adaptable. So the rep ranges for these types of exercises, I would say the best rep range should be somewhere in between like 6 and 12 reps. So that's the first muscle, we got 3 more to go. Okay, so the next quad muscle we're gonna cover is your VMO, your vastus medialis. And it's the muscle on the inside that attaches to the inside of your quad tendon. And it's the teardrop shaped muscle that you see right here. And some unique characteristics about that. Also, like the vastus lateralis, it's a unipennate muscle. Its muscle fiber composition is more of a blend of fast 1 or of type 1 and type 2, or fast twitch, slow twitch, but it's leans more heavily towards the slow twitch. So it's developed a little bit better with the higher rep ranges. And has a much shorter, thicker muscle belly than this one. So you really need a good amount of knee flexion in order to get a good stretch. And we all know that muscles grow really good with a good stretch. But unlike the vastus lateralis, it's not affected as much by where your knee is in relation to your hip bone. So that being said, it is affected, the amount of stretch you can get is affected by limitations in your ankle joint. All right, so we all have varying degrees of ankle mobility, but this knee joint can always stretch a little bit more probably than our knee or than our ankle joint will allow it. So for that reason, the 3 best exercises you can use to develop your vastus medialis, or your teardrop muscle, are some form of heels elevated or cannonball squats, where I do like to turn my toes out a little bit, so it de-emphasizes your vastus lateralis, so this can't help out quite as much. That puts a little bit more of the onus on your teardrop. Elevating your heels takes your ankle joint mobility out of the equation, allows you to keep a very upright posture, so you use even less hamstrings and a little bit less glutes in the movement. And then from here, whether you want to use a barbell, a front hold barbell, or a goblet squat, or kettlebell, you're going to be very upright. You let your knees go out to the side, and you're gonna get a very good depth and stretch here, and you start to feel a great stretch here in your VMO. Drive your knees back and come back up. So I could be holding a barbell now. And I like to turn my toes out for another reason, because it shortens down the moment arm here between my butt. And so if I was like this, see, my butt would be very far back and I'd be tempted to hinge forward a little bit more, which isn't bad, but it puts a little bit more stretch in my glutes. So if you want a more balanced exercise, your knees forward here, because you're gonna get a little bit more glute into it. Still a great quad stimulus though, but this takes my glutes out of it just a little bit. Lets me focus a little bit more on that teardrop right there. And since, like I said, these are a little bit more slow twitch dominated than your vastus lateralis, that higher reps will get this a little bit better. So people that do reps in the 10 to 20 rep range, or like, you know, cyclists, like speed cyclists and people like that, they tend to have much thicker VMOs. All right, moving on. Okay, so going over the next exercise is great for your VMO, a normal step up. So what this does here is this really helps you get this knee really far forward here and bias this. And it has a really good moment arm here from a step up, maybe a little bit better than you'd be able to get with a squat. And there's a lot of tension at the bottom where there's a lot of stretch here. So step ups are a great option to develop your VMO. And it requires a lot of knee joint stability here. So they really kick in there. So what you want to try to do when you do this, a lot of people watch when I step down, see how I let my knee drift back and I just fall to the ground. What you want to do, push your knee forward. So there's a lot of pressure on the ball of your foot here. Knee is forward, come up and forward at the same time. And on the way down, your chest and your butt go backwards, but your knee goes forward. That's really going to start to put a lot of stretch here. And then when you hit the ground, you can like let this knee bend a little bit so you get even a better stretch. See how I'm keeping a little bend in this knee? Help yourself out of the hole if you need it here. Come back up, try to control the descent. It's a good stretch at the bottom and back up. Here, back up. All right, I'm about to go over the final great exercise for VMOs. Of course, basic exercises like squats is gonna work your VMO great. Squats work your entire quad complex great, but this is just targeting them a little bit better. Because this has such a thick muscle belly here, a lot of times it's not fully contracted when we're just standing with a slight knee bend. Or when you do squats and things like that, you never fully lock out like that, because first of all, it's not great when you have a lot of weight on your back to do that. You always just keep and finish with a soft knee. So, especially for like rehab scenarios and things like that, these are called terminal knee extensions, or TKEs. You put a band behind your knee, go out until it pulls your heel off the ground here, and then simply drive your heel into the ground and lift your toe and try to flex and contract your VMO right here as you do it. And like I said, you can do high reps with these. And since your VMO has a lot of slow twitch muscle fibers, they're gonna respond really well to this. So especially if you need some knee rehab or something, or you want a little extra to finish off your leg workout, these are a great VMO exercise right here. So to recap, the 3 best exercises to target your teardrop: cannonball squats, step ups, and terminal knee extensions. Okay, the next quad muscle I'm gonna cover is my favorite quad muscle. It's called the rectus femoris. It's a middle quad muscle here. So you'll see it's the one that's apparent that makes that little knife shape or spear shape in your quad. And it is the only biarticulate muscle in your quadricep muscle group. That simply means it acts on 2 joints. So it acts on your knee joint, and it does the same thing your other quad muscles do. It helps you extend your knee, okay? So it's stretched with knee flexion, and it also helps you flex your hip. Okay, so what implications does that have on our training? So if you look at something called Lombard's paradox, you know, for the squat, we have to both extend our knee and extend our hip, right? So the question is, how do we do that? So especially when we have a muscle responsible for hip flexion and knee extension? Well, the answer is this muscle needs to not be fully activated in things like squatting and lunging and multi-joint compound exercises. That's why I push back against people that say you should only do compound exercises, because this isn't the only muscle in the body like that. There's several muscles that don't get fully activated when we do more than one joint at one time. So it's something called active inhibition. Okay, so the best way to train your rectus femoris, all right, some characteristics about it, it's highly fast twitch, so it gets trained with heavy loads, and it's a bipennate muscle. So this muscle here, it has a tendon that runs right here, and it has fibers that run off of either side like a feather, okay? So characteristics of a bipennate muscle are, it doesn't have the same, as good a range of motion as a unipennate muscle, not nearly as good as a fusiform muscle like our biceps, but since it has fibers going into each side of the tendon, it's able to produce a lot more force. So it gives up range of motion for force, okay? And it's also biarticulate. So because of that, when we do things like sprint and our leg is behind our hip here, and this rectus femoris, it's stretched out because this is flexed, so it gets stretched with knee flexion, and this is extended, so it gets extended at the hip. This rectus femoris is really long, and it has to produce a lot of force from that long length. And remember, bipennate muscles aren't good at producing long lengths, so this muscle gets pulled a lot when we do things like try to sprint. So we need to train it with doing knee extension without also doing hip extension, okay? So we need to isolate it, and we need to train it in both the shortened position for max strength and the lengthened position. So one of my favorite exercises to train the rectus femoris are banded sissy squats. And the banded nature of this gives it a variable resistance aspect, or accommodating resistance. So when you get to here and it's not very hard, the band adds a little bit of resistance. So this is called a squat, but it's really just a knee extension. So you're trying not to move at your hips. You're gonna get your knees really far forward here. So you're gonna feel a great stretch in your rectus femoris. And then you're gonna drive your heels into the ground and lock out your legs. So you get a little bit of that TKE motion going here for your VMOs as well. Stretch, knees low to the ground, lock it out. Lean back, stretch, knees as low to the ground as you can get them, lock it out. Now, a lot of people, it causes them a lot of pain to do this activity just because their knees aren't ready for it yet. So I'm going to show you an alternative here in a second. Good. Now that works the rectus femoris from the stretched position. But things like leg extensions are also important, because that's gonna allow you to work the rectus femoris from the shortened position as well to produce max strength. And that's what's really gonna help you get extra strength for things like squatting and things like that. So I'll show you an adjusted movement you can do. If we come over here, if sissy squats hurt your knee, all you have to do is a version of the traditional wall sit here, okay? But instead of doing it like this, all you're gonna do is try to keep your heels as close to the wall as possible, and then hold that position here. So that's gonna hold under tension isometrically from that lengthened position for your rectus femoris. Okay, I would just recommend people do this more so than normal wall squats anyway. It's much harder, okay? And you're gonna feel that right here, right away. So that is my favorite exercise for the rectus femoris, but the takeaway here is that to completely work your quadriceps, you're gonna need more than just compound exercises, and that takeaway holds true for most muscle groups in your body. Okay, and that brings us to the last of the 4 quad muscles, and it's a muscle that's very important even though you can't see it. It is underneath your rectus femoris here. It's called your vastus intermedius. And what are some characteristics of that muscle? It's also bipennate, just like your rectus femoris, which, what does that mean now? That means that it can produce a lot of force, more force than a unipennate muscle. It means it doesn't have a great range of motion. And also a thing about it, it's non-biarticulate. So it only articulates one joint, your knee joint. So you don't have to worry about hip action or anything else like that. Also, it's in a very advantageous position of pull. It attaches right in the middle of the femur here, lengthwise and centerwise. So it's a direct line of pull to extend that knee. So what does that mean? It means it's in a position where it can really help us produce a lot of force. It's one of the prime movers of the quadriceps, even though it's not one of the larger quadricep muscles. So in order to fully develop that, what does that mean? It means we need to go very heavy, but we don't need a lot of range of motion there. It's also very fast twitch, just like the rectus femoris, so it responds to heavy weight. So we don't need to go ass to grass to work that particular muscle, okay, in our squats. Actually, depth isn't really even all that important for this, but we need a lot of tension. So I like to use traditional barbell back squats for this, and I'm not gonna use a lot of weight today, but I'm gonna just pretend like there's a lot of weight on here. Pretend like I'm strong, and I know what I'm talking about. So for these, you don't need to elevate your heels, because you're not really worried about going down that far. And this is one reason why I don't really feel like you need to always do ass to grass squats, especially if you're gonna be doing other leg exercises for your quads to complement it, but you do need to go heavy. So for me, I try to stop where the moment arm is the longest, and that is when I'm just beneath parallel. So I'm gonna go down here, and I'm gonna stop just about where my hip crease and where my thighs are parallel to the ground. That's when I have a really long moment arm, and I'm in a very strong position. And of course, my other quadricep muscles are gonna help out as well, but this is gonna allow me to load up a ton of weight here and really get that vastus intermedius involved in the movement. So this is the one you can really dumb this down. You don't have to overthink this. Just squat heavy weight. And this is one where the knees being forward and the knees being in or out, a step up or split stance, it doesn't really matter. Just tax it with a lot of tension, okay? The other ones, we kind of had to set a favorable stage in order to put them in a biomechanical position in order to really tax them at length. But with the vastus intermedius, we really don't need to worry about that. Okay, if you're curious to know how I program my exercise or my workouts to get all of the quad muscles, you can see for yourself. I use this theory in my workouts that I have online in my app. So I have over 52 weeks of workouts in there. You can try it for free for a week, and you'll really see, knowing this, how I structure all of my workouts in order to make sure that I'm getting complete quad development. Now, I will give you a sample workout at the end here, but if you want other ways to structure it and or maybe incorporate it into a total body structure or a more complete leg workout to get your hamstrings and your glutes too, I'd encourage you to try my app out for a week to see for yourself. But I'm gonna give you a bonus muscle here that's not part of the quadriceps group, but it is a major part of your anterior thigh group. So when you look at thighs, the quad muscles I've talked about end here, but this is not all of our quadricep muscle. And it really, there's another muscle that really contributes to making your thighs look big, and it's your adductor muscle, specifically your adductor magnus. So your adductor magnus, of course it adducts, which means it brings your leg towards your midline, but it's also a very powerful hip extender. So what does that mean? Well, let's think about it. So it does not cross our knee joint, so it's not affected by knee extension, right? Unlike our hamstring muscles that are also powerful hip extenders, okay? It also adducts, unlike our glutes, right? Which hip extend and abduct and externally rotate. So what can we do to train our adductor magnus and to really fill out the front of our thighs? Well, there's two things mainly. One would be hip flexion exercises with a wider stance. So when you stand up, there's a good bit of adduction involved here, and you have a good bit of hip hinge here. So it's really glute dominant here, okay? Along with that line of thought, you have your Cossacks here. So you're both squatting with hip hinge while you're forcing adduction here. So there's a lot of adduction requirements here to hold that femur in place. And then the third one is a single joint exercise, and it's simply a bent knee hip extension. Now, hip RDLs like this, they also work your adductor magnus, but they work your hamstrings a lot. So this right here, by bending your knees and shortening up, it takes a lot of the strain off of your hamstring muscles and really forces your adductor magnus to do a good amount of that hip extension work. So it's getting a really good stretch, because now this stretch isn't limited by my mobility at my knee joint. So when I do, let's say an RDL right here, okay, when I go down, my hamstrings are getting this great stretch because they're stretched at the hip joint. My legs are mostly straight, so my hamstrings are getting stretched from two joints. So my range of motion is limited by my hamstring range of motion. It is not limited by my adductor magnus range of motion. It is not fully stretched. And we know that muscles grow great from a stretched position. So when I bend my knees, that hip hinge is no longer limited by my mobility at my knee joint, and see how I can hip hinge a lot deeper here, okay? And that will fully stretch out my adductor magnus and allow me to work it from the stretched position. And since it's on the medial side of my thighs, when it grows out, it makes my thighs look bigger. So that's a bonus exercise for you. All right, so now let me show you how to put all this together. You're gonna wanna mobilize first, so slow movements. We're working through a full range of motion. And then you're gonna wanna work your heaviest, most taxing movement first. Now, if you're older, like me, I alternate. So I do a unilateral movement first half the time and a heavy bilateral movement the other half of the time. But if you're on the younger side and you still wanna develop your CNS, go heavy bilateral first, okay? Got young joints, you can take it, so movement prep. So that's gonna work a complete quad stimulus, total body strength, high CNS load, and it's gonna work your vastus intermedius, that quad muscle that's underneath, okay? Make sure that thing is fully developed. And normal back squats, as we all know, is great for all of your quads. It's not like it's not hitting a quad muscle. It is maybe, it's hard to say, but it's maybe the single best exercise for quad development. Leg presses are great too for quad development, but it's hard to beat heavy barbell back squats. Then what I would do is I would go into the unilateral movement after that requires a lot of stability and balance before I get too tired, okay? So I'm gonna deload the heavy weight off on here. So like, let's say I was doing like 450 pounds, I'm gonna deload all but let's say 185 or 225 pounds, depending on how heavy I wanna go. So that heavy bilateral movement at the start, you're probably gonna, to get a good strength stimulus there, you're probably wanna go somewhere between like the 2 and 8 rep range. So a sweet spot there would be somewhere like the 5 to 7 rep range probably for your bilateral squats. So the second movement, I'm gonna do that front foot elevated forward lunge here, okay? All right, and that's gonna really, my vastus lateralis already got a really good stimulus from those normal high bar back squats. And this is really gonna target my vastus lateralis before I get too tired, and then the balance and coordination becomes an issue here, right? So I'm holding that weight on my back right here, getting a good stretch and targeting my quad sweep. Then, and this is cool because you don't have to change stations either. What you can do, and with the same weight, so you don't really need to change weight. You can add a little bit of weight for these if you want to. At this point, my quads are starting to get pretty tired and I'm starting to get worn out. So I don't want to focus on balance or stability or even move heavy loads necessarily at that point. So that's when I will go back and I will do my cannonball squats with a really good depth here, high reps, because remember your VMO, slow twitch muscle fibers, getting down nice and low in that range of motion, okay? Cranking out 10 to 12 reps. With the front foot elevated forward lunges, remember vastus lateralis, it has muscle fiber types that can go back or forth pretty easily. So we want to develop the bigger ones mostly, and that's going to be like 6 to 8 reps for those maybe, okay? So we did somewhere like, let's say 4 to 6 reps here, 6 to 8 reps for the forward lunges. Now it's time we really go for that pump and some straight hypertrophy. For these, we're talking 10 up to 20 reps, about 3 sets, okay? So now we've targeted the vastus intermedius and all of the quad muscles with those heavy back squats. We've focused the vastus lateralis, that quad sweep, and now we're getting that teardrop here, okay? All right, so that's 3 exercises. So we're missing 1 quad muscle, right? So now is when I would do my banded sissy squat. So I'm gonna walk over here. I'm pretty fatigued now, so I probably don't want to do too much more compound lifting, especially something with weight on my back. But my joints are nice and warmed up because I've been doing a lot. So if they're not warmed up at this point, then they're just not going to get warmed up, right? All right, and now is when I want to focus on that good stretch for my rectus femoris here, late in the workout, right? So with these, the rectus femoris is fairly fast twitch, but it's a hard movement. So if you get a good stretch here, you can maybe get 6 to 10 reps, depending on how strong you are. Hello, bug. All right, now, after that, if you want to, you can finish out with some high rep leg extensions, or now is when you can get your adductor magnus here with your bent knee hip extensions, okay? Now this is assuming, so I'm not gonna demonstrate because my dog is in the way, but this is where you get those bent knee hip extensions in. And this is a quad focused leg workout, but if you want more of a complete leg workout, you just go to my app and there's total body, there's hamstring, glute focused leg workouts in there. There's balanced leg workouts, there's total body workouts too that include a lot of this in there. But that's how you grow your quads.